Welcome back to The Rebel's Edge, where we look at a stock that's broken. Some might even say it snapped. We'll have that for you right after this on The Rebel's Edge. Bam!
I think I like that tease, John. That might have been one of the better ones.
Some might even say snapped. I think you guys know what we're talking about there. But welcome to The Rebel's Edge. John Najarian here, Pete Najarian there. Jared's sort of all over the place, as you'll see and hear throughout the broadcast. But we really appreciate you joining us, folks. We're going to break down for you 4 stocks that we always do. We're going to give you macro minute and fantastic futures for our friends at CME. And maybe let's dive straight in, Pete, to the macro minute.
Yeah.
And macro minute is the S&P is getting closer and closer to the magic 5,000. There's almost no stopping it, Pete. No matter what goes on, no matter how nervous people get about, maybe they're going to push out the cutting to the summer or whatever, as far as interest rates, people just kind of shrug. It goes out down for a day and gets it all back the next.
Yeah, it is amazing, John. I'll give you the exact polar opposite of that one. How about China? China cannot figure it out, and they continue to throw different items at it all, obviously. And they just can't seem to get it right. And when I take a look at somebody like BABA down today about 5%, I look at some of the ETFs that are down more than 2%. China cannot seem to be able to fly straight, John. It's a real struggle. And this is something that's been going on for a while. They have lost trillions of dollars over the last couple of years, and they just can't seem to be able to find their way. And it's an odd problem that we're watching play out in front of us. And they were the same ones that were kind of teasing the U.S. years ago about the kinds of things that they're having to do now.
Yeah. Well, they're going to have to throw a lot of money at this problem, Pete, because they stayed locked down for too damn long.
Yep.
And, it's not political, but it's just a fact that if your society locks down and you don't consume as much and you don't produce as much, you're going to have a problem with growth. And that's what China has right now. All right, let's talk about fantastic futures.
Fantastic futures.
Well, Pete, I'm going to stick with energy, but I'm going to jump off the nat gas pounding and jump on to crude oil, because crude oil futures are moving up towards 75 again. And it's a matter of time, folks, before people get the idea that we really don't have enough crude oil to refine into gasoline and diesel and fuel oil and all that. And we haven't had to use too much fuel oil because even though we've had a little bit of a cold snap on the East Coast and in the Midwest, it hasn't lasted all that long. But man, we're going to be coming out of this winter and needing an awful lot of gasoline, it looks like to me, Pete. And crude oil, that's how you get gasoline.
Yep, absolutely, John. It's interesting. We haven't seen as much on the UOA side of this thing. So at some point in time, you would think we'd start to see some of those unusual options start to show up a little bit more in energy. We haven't seen a whole lot of that. I'll tell you what, for me, John, the fantastic futures is exactly where we've been. You were talking about yesterday. I jumped on with you. I'm going to jump on it again. We're underneath $2 now on nat gas. It's been an incredible ride. We had that little bit of a spike and we just couldn't hold on. And it's been just dropping. Yeah, it's been pretty amazing, actually. And it's down today, down more than 1.5% again. So it's something that I think is at least worth exploring and keeping an eye on that, along with crude oil. So you and I are both on board with this whole energy thing for our fantastic futures.
Yeah, well, and we'll have an energy-related play later on with Nphase, Pete, ENPH. But let's dive right into Snap, because Snap just had a horrific report, Pete. I mean, social media giant, yes, they are. They haven't been able to take much in the way of ads away from X or Twitter. But nonetheless, they do have an awful lot of folks on their platform, but they can't really monetize it. Stock was falling like a stone in the pre-market. It was down 25, then 30%. Now it's down 34%, Pete. Revenues grew. Yeah, they do sell some ads on their platform, but they still missed consensus estimates, and their guidance going forward was pretty weak. And you know what, Pete? They might have had a little unusual option activity because people were sort of geared up for them to trade to the downside. And how do they do that, folks? With put options. Put options are the right to sell and so forth. Now, it wasn't huge, but there was some activity. It didn't spike enough for us to really jump on it, folks. But nonetheless, Snap is a scary stock today.
And to your point, John, they miss on the revenues. You look at the earnings, everything about this report was pretty awful, I would say, which is why it's down as much as you were just talking about, 30%, 34%, whatever it might be. Last I looked, John, the surprising thing for me was when I look at the 52-week highs and lows, this is a stock that actually is kind of finding itself right in the middle right now. And I would think with the pounding that it's had in the past and now that you would actually see it a lot closer to 52-week lows. We're not seeing that, but that doesn't mean it might not happen in the not too distant future. They've got huge shorts in the stock that unless they start to cover, and I'm not seeing them cover today yet, but they've got huge shorts, an incredible amount of debt. And then you look at the cash burn, it's only $1.1 billion. I mean, this is a lot of issues in front of us right now when it comes to Snap. The CEO is always on. He's always willing to talk about everything, but I don't think that's actually been working. I think they've got to figure out a lot more than they have, and they've got a growth issue. And until they can get that figured out, they are going to continue to, I think, get a little bit more like they're going down the drain, because I don't see anything that shows me right now that these guys have much of a prayer other than some of those short squeezes that we've seen time and time again.
Yeah, and boy, they could use a short squeeze right about now, Pete, but I don't think they're getting one.
No.
The shorts are feasting on this one. How about this one, Pete? Roblox. Now, we did have unusual activity in Roblox. And as Jared has put on the screen, enter the Roblosphere. Look at those. A couple pretty big purchases. The stock popped as much as 14% in the pre. And what Pete and I pay attention to, folks, and all of our subscribers as well, is when we see unusual activity, if it's in calls, it's bullish. If it's in puts, bearish. Well, this was clearly bullish activity. And one thing that I'm a little, not so much degrading the stock because of this, Pete, but you know, most of their income comes from 9 and 12-year-old kids.
Yeah.
Well, you know, I guess parents give those kids money. Some of those kids probably have paper routes or whatever, but my gosh, to have a multi-billion-dollar company hinging on 9 and 12-year-old kids, you know, that demographic, that's a little scary to me anyway, Pete.
It is a little scary, John, but let's also face the facts. There's a heck of a lot of parents out there that use something other than themselves as parents for the kids. That's just the facts. It's the way it works. So the gaming side of this whole thing and everything that we look at, well, if you're 9 to 12, you're probably pretty excited when your family says, oh, you know what? You want to just, you stay over there and just play some of these games. Daily active users were up 22% year over year, John. So they really have shown everything that you would want to see. It's why the stock had a really nice move to the upside. Is it sustainable? Maybe, who knows? But I can tell you this, really close to the 52-week highs. I got up there towards 46, 52-week highs, a little bit north of 47. This is a stock that when you look at their numbers, yeah, there's a small amount of short, so there is a little bit of a squeeze, but I'm actually going to not say it's about the squeeze. I think it's more about the numbers that they were able to put up this quarter. People were pretty excited about that, embraced that, and I think that's why we're seeing the stock as close to the 52-week highs as it is right now. Can it go higher? It could, but I think for right now, this would be a good time to pause.
Yeah, I'm in the same camp with you there, Pete. Roblox, like I say, and Pete hit the nail on the head with the not everybody parents correctly. That doesn't mean that we're ripping parents that might give their kids some money so they can go in there to Roblox and spend it. But if you're letting that be the arbiter of what your kid does with their spare time, rather than just being a small part, if it's a really big part, well, maybe there's a problem there. Mm-hmm. All right, Yum China, Pete. YUM, symbol for yum, and stocks like Pizza Hut and KFC and Long John Silver's and all that. But then you go put a C at the end of it, YUMC, and that's Yum China. And they had pretty upbeat results. They did 11 billion in revenue, Pete. So to your point about what's going on in China, at least China still has a taste for Yum China's products, because 11 billion is a pretty big number.
It is, John. It was really a fabulous report when you really look across the board. And maybe that's because people are kind of scrambling around and they're actually trading down. We talk about it here in the US all the time. Are they trading down a little bit to go to some of the places that obviously Yum Brands has? And that's that fast food area, right? I mean, that's a possibility. Maybe people are doing that kind of a trade, but I can tell you this, revenue up 19% year over year. That's a pretty big number, pretty bold number. The other thing that they have stood their ground and said they're going to do it, John, expansion. They're going to expand by 1,500 to 1,700 new stores in 2024. That's why people look to China. That's why a lot of these companies, and we've talked about the Starbucks of the world and so many others, Nike, whatever, but they have that size and that major size that China can bring. And if you have a brand like what they've got, I think they sit right where they want to be. They are in the sweet spot, John, for the folks that are actually kind of dialing it back a little bit from maybe going out to a higher end restaurant and actually going more to the fast food. And obviously their expansion ideas are exactly telling us that. That's a pretty good signal. And those numbers, outstanding. Earnings, revenue, across the board, and the guidance, it all looks pretty great.
It does. And I think a lot of the Chinese consumers, Pete, have really got a taste for some of that Western food that, of course, Yum China serves. And you know how tough it is when you have a taste for it here, folks. And over there, it might be a luxury item for a lot of those workers that, as we all know, don't make nearly as much as their American counterparts for doing some of those very similar jobs. All right, let's take a look at Nphase, Pete. We talked about energy. You talked about nat gas. I talked about crude oil. Well, this is solar. And these guys had a triple miss, Pete. So they missed on top line, bottom line, and guidance. But then the CEO on a conference call said that a lot of their restructuring would be completed in the first half of the year. That was bullish, even though the guidance was not. So this is one of those rare instances where you can have the earnings exactly not impressing Wall Street, but the fact that they've got a restructuring underway and people think they're going to accomplish a lot of these goals earlier than expected, that's why they got a thumbs up today. That's why they were up as much as 14%.
Yeah. And John, we've seen a lot, or at least picking up a lot more in the solar space. We talked about a stock actually earlier in the week, and now here we've got Nphase Solar once again. You talked about restructuring. That absolutely was huge. They also talked about margin projections going forward as well, improving. So the combination of all of that and what they're doing and how they're doing it and the restructuring, I think that's what's giving this such an amazing lift today, because like you said, up what, 14, 15, 16%, at least early on. That's a pretty nice jump. And we don't see that very often, but we are seeing a little bit more in that space, alternative energy. And we're definitely looking at it from the perspective right now of this particular world of solar. I think it's interesting, John. Am I going to jump on this one, though? Not yet. I'm still one of those guys who's still a little bit skeptical about how things are going, but I like what we're seeing. And maybe if we could see a little bit more of this across the board for solar, everybody else, then maybe it's a little bit more interesting. For now, I'm okay sitting on the sideline.
I am too. Well, what do you got as far as your red zone sports today, Pete? Still NFL, or are you going to go a different direction?
Well, we got a combination of two things. First of all, we all know it's Super Bowl week. We're going to talk about the Super Bowl every single day. You can see it on the panel right there. We're going to hit that in just a second. But I think the fun thing that we're looking at today, John, is it's that combination thing now, finally. It's the Senior Bowl is over. The next thing up is free agency. But for those college kids, the next thing up is going to be the combine. So before they go to the combine, they kind of had a mini combine for the select players that were in the Senior Bowl, right? I mean, it's the opportunity for the pro coaches to go there, take a little look, get a little bit of a glimpse at some of those players. And a few interesting things have happened, John. Caleb Williams has been forever. I don't necessarily agree with it, but it doesn't really matter what I think on that. It seems like he's been the number one guy the entire year, right? College football year. Caleb Williams is going to be the number one pick. Well, Marvin Harrison actually jumped over him now. He is now considered the number one pick. Now, it will matter whether or not you're looking for a quarterback or a receiver. That's going to be the big question. But in terms of the rankings right now, you've got Harrison all the way up there. You've got Caleb Williams sitting at number 2. Then you've got Drake May, John. Then you get Malik Neighbors, who's a wide receiver, LSU. Then Joe Alt. Now, Joe Alt, you and I both know him. We know his dad, John, played at Iowa. He's in the Ring of Honor down there in Kansas City at Arrowhead. Joe is exactly his father. He's close to 6'9", about 340 pounds. He could play tight end if he really wanted to, but he moves over and he used to be a quarterback, John, in high school at very large sizes. He finally got shifted over. But it's pretty fun to see, somebody that you know that well, and he's projected to be now the 5th pick in the draft, or at least from a valuation standpoint, he's the number 5 guy they've got from a ratings. But here's the interesting thing. You got to go through the first 10 picks right now before you start to get to defensive players. But then once you do, you get 3 in a row, John. You've got Dallas Turner out of Bama, edge rusher. Latu out of UCLA, edge rusher. Verse out of Florida State, edge rusher. It shows you where the priorities are right now and what the NFL is looking for, what they're needing, and what some of these players really look like. So you do get a little bit of defense once you get all the way down towards that the 10th pick in the draft. But I'll tell you, John, I think that there's a lot of really, really interesting players, and not just the players I was just talking about. This will be a really good draft because we're deep with quarterbacks, really deep with receivers, some really nice offensive linemen, some edge rushers. I mean, there's somebody for everybody right now in this draft. So it'll be interesting to see how some of those picks start getting traded around once we do get to draft day.
Yeah, and the Bears have a lot of those picks. So I'm hoping, Pete, that they get somebody desperate for either Marvin Harrison Jr. or Caleb Williams and want to make a trade with the Bears. So the Bears could maybe get Mr. Alt, who played right down the road at Notre Dame, as you said, along with another big stud, whether it's, one of those edge rushers or whatever. But the Bears are loaded with picks. And so is Seattle, quite frankly, because of that tremendous trade that they made. But I would, sticking with Washington, Pete, where Seattle is located, of course, I'd say Penix. I know he had a lot of injuries, but I also know that the kid was damn near unstoppable. And he, in the second half of that game against USC, his team scored 14 points and Caleb Williams did a big goose egg. So, I know he had injuries and so forth, but there's a really smart kid that has a lot of great experience. And I think that kid might be a big surprise to some folks how high he goes, despite not having prototypical size and not having USC's backing, basically, and push towards the Heisman.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of great quarterbacks, John, and it's amazing to me that some of them are viewed completely differently for you and I than what we're hearing from others, where it could be a Penix, it could be, Oregon, it could be a lot of different schools out there where you look at these quarterbacks and you go, God, Bo Nix, I mean, how do you not want to have him? And a lot of people are projecting he and Penix both pretty far down, the ladder. So it'll be interesting. I think there's going to be some great opportunities for people when it comes to that. How do you build a football team? You get a general manager who understands football better than everybody else. That's how. They made one big mistake with the 49ers, John. So they made an awful decision when they decided they were going to trade up for Trey Lance. They gave away 3 number ones to get all the way up to get Trey Lance. Not on the schedule anymore, sitting down there in Dallas, and who knows where he might end up at some point in time. But that being said, how about what the 49ers have accomplished, John? They had that trade, terrible trade, right? You give away all these first rounders and you don't have the guy that you did all of that for even on the roster any longer. And yet you look at what John Lynch has been able to do. Now, he lost Saleh, his defensive coordinator, Ryans, his defensive coordinator, McDaniel, his offensive coordinator. All of those guys are now head coaches somewhere else. And meanwhile, the 49ers are right back in the Super Bowl. I mean, it's really pretty amazing to see what they've been able to accomplish. And you got to give credit to the coaches, of course, as well. But John Lynch, for what he's been able to do for a long time now with the San Francisco 49ers, absolutely incredible. So I guess the question I have, John, is 4 years ago, they were in front of the Chiefs by 10 points going into the fourth quarter. They lost the game 31-20. What do we think as we're getting closer? We got to start talking about it. We got today and tomorrow. What do you think about the game? Do you think Purdy's got what I think he has? Does he got ice water in his veins, or does he play, a bad first half and can't recover in the second half? Or what do you think as you're kind of looking forward to the Super Bowl? I know we were talking about betting yesterday, but now let's just talk about the game itself. What do you kind of expect right now?
Well, I expect San Francisco with the combination, Pete, of 2 of the best edge rushers in football, Young and Bosa, of course, along with Armstead up the middle. And I'm going to put Fred, Pete, that linebacker, 54, I'm going to put him in there too, because that guy, I think part of his responsibility is going to be to make sure that Mahomes doesn't get to break up the middle, because that's what he likes to do. Sometimes he'll sprint out, Pete, but for the most part, he sees the pressure and he steps up and goes right or left. Armstead is going to be there, but he needs obviously a hand at times, and I think 54 is going to give him that hand. If they keep him boxed in, then I think they might once again be trailing by up to 2 touchdowns in the fourth quarter, and I think San Francisco wins.
Yeah, it's going to be fun, John. I think it's going to be such a chess match because of the fact that defense is so good, but they didn't look as good once they got into the playoffs. They had a little bit of a struggle stopping the running game. So then you start to wonder, well, if they get any kind of success with Pacheco, that will open it up, and it will. So I would say the game hinges upon exactly that. If they're able to run the ball, Kansas City probably has a monstrous advantage in the game, just because it's Pat Mahomes. We know what he can do. We know how good he is. He's a pressure guy. He doesn't run. Everybody thinks he's a runner. He's not really. He's just an incredible scrambler back there who does find the right people when he's starting to run around back there, just kind of looking downfield, because he's always got both eyes still looking downfield. I think it's going to be great. I'm excited for it. Every day I think I have a different winner, John. One day I wake up, I'm thinking, man, I think it's Kansas City. The next day I'm like, no, heck no, it's the 49ers. You and I sat there looking into Kezar Stadium as kids up there in Twin Peaks, and became 49ers fans back then. So I still got them in my heart as well.
Yeah, it's going to be a great game. It might be a record setter, Pete, in terms of viewers and so forth, because a rematch like this, it's pretty much a dream rematch. I know that the rest of the nation wanted the Lions, allegedly, when you look at the map with the colors and everything and who supports who, and everything outside of San Francisco, outside of Northern California, everybody wanted the Lions. Well, the Lions had their shot and then didn't kick the field goal when they should have. And, the problem might be that Campbell had just too much guts, Pete. And he rolled the dice when he shouldn't have. But Kansas City, great team. San Francisco, great team. You got to love the way they match up, too, with 2 great tight ends, 2 all-pro tight ends, Kittle and, of course, Travis Kelce, and there will be some Taylor Swift
How can you not?
issues, of course, but I'm sure they probably have somebody on the plane with her, Pete, flying back with her from Japan, from Tokyo, that'll be documenting, how far out she is and how she's going to get there. And, the good news is that I'm guessing, Pete, they're going to put her into San Jose Airport, not San Francisco, because San Jose Airport is like a 9-iron from the Levi's Stadium. They say San Francisco, it's really Palo Alto and Mountain View down that direction, but she'll be super close to it. And I'm sure she'll make the game unless the plane has any issues with wind or otherwise. But
I got a good one for you, John. What if she parachutes in from the plane into the stadium? How great. I wonder if we could do that as a prop bet. Let's try to see if we can float that out to our buddies out in Vegas and see if we can make that happen at Caesars Sportsbook.
there's probably only like a couple hands full of SEALs, Pete, that could parachute out of a G6 into Levi's Stadium. For the most part, those guys are jumping out of prop planes, not jets, but you never know. This is such a crazy thing. Well, make sure you tune in tomorrow because we'll have all the latest prop bets, the news for what's going to be happening as we face that game and as we have more stocks. And make sure, folks, that you check out our new AI tool. That's artificial intelligence, AI. It's known as Rebel Research, and it basically scans 35,000 stocks. You put the stock symbol in, and it'll tell you, here's support, here's resistance, here's what the fundamentals say, here's what the sentiment analysis says as well, across all of the different socials. So there is no other tool out there, folks, that is like this, and certainly no other tool that's under $1 a day, because it's $19 a month. Check out how many trading days there are in a month, folks. Virtually every month has 20 or more trading days. So that's how I'm saying it's under $1 a day. And if you're somebody who likes to have a little backup when you're deciding to make an investment, this is a great tool to lean on. And it comes to you at marketrebellion.com/research. That's marketrebellion.com/research. Pete and I will be back tomorrow at 1 p.m. Eastern Time.